Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi ala ni'matil islami wa kafa biha ni'ma. All praise and gratitude be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on His blessing of Islam, which suffices as a blessing. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Welcome back. Inshallah, today we're going to begin with the fourth para, and today is the seventh talk. We are in Surah Al Imran, and yesterday we had completed up to ayat number 91. And inshallah, this evening we are going to do from ayat number 92 to ayat number 164. So let's just begin with the first ayat, and this is how Surah Al Imran begins in the sense of the fourth para. That's how the fourth para begins. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. You will never attain piety until you spend in Allah's way from that which you love. And whatever you spend, indeed Allah is knowing of it. Now here is a great test being given, and this is a test of charity. Do you give what you value? You know, sometimes there are things that we love. And it is these things that Allah expects us to give when we give charity in the name of Allah. It is this unselfishness, it is this generosity that Allah demands from us. Can you give a part of what you love for the sake of Allah? I think it's part of our nature. It's a lot easier to give away things which we no longer need in our life, like clothes. My clothes don't fit me. Fine, I can give it away as a charity in the name of Allah. Or food that has become stale. It's a lot easier to give food when someone comes in and says, I'm hungry and I need food. And anyway, you're not going to eat this food. So it's a lot easier to say, oh, I'm giving it in the way of Allah. But can you give your new dress? Can I give my new dress? Can I give the fresh fruits that we bought today? Well, I think if we want to attain piety, that's what Quran is teaching us. We need to do that. We need to actually spend in Allah's way what we love. Because Allah tells us that it is now is the time to convert our world currency, our world assets into the assets of the hereafter. Because if we don't do that, then we may reach to paradise, which will be excellent. But clearly we want to reach paradise and be also rich over there. It's not just money that Quran says when you give in the way of Allah, whatever talent you have. Whether you have a skill, whether you have time available, whether you have effort available, whether you can help people out. If you do it for the sake of Allah, do the best. Whatever, the best time that you have, spend part of that time in the way of Allah if you want to really attain high level of piety. Next ayat, all food was lawful for the children of Israel except what Israel had made unlawful to himself before the Torah was revealed. Say, so bring the Torah and read it if you are indeed truthful. Now Israel is the name of Hazrat Yaqub alayhi salam, and Quran is Quran is actually giving us a reference to 4 questions or 3 questions that were asked by Jews to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and one of them was, which is the food that Yaqub alayhi salam had left on account of a nazar when he became ill. So Hazrat Yaqub alayhi salam had become ill, and he promised that if he regains his health and the illness goes away, he promised that he's going to leave his favorite food, and that was the meat of a camel. Now when Hazrat Yaqub alayhi salam recovered, he just stopped eating the meat of a camel. And Jews started to consider this as an infringement, and they thought that this is part of our Sharia, and if you eat the meat of a camel, then it's a violation of Sharia. Quran actually comes in and cancels this dietary injunction which was laid down by the Torah, and explains the reason for it. Now, I think what is another thing that's very important for us to understand over here is that making something haram as halal is completely prohibited. That's Allah has made something haram and we make it halal. But similarly, making a halal also haram is equally disallowed in Islam. This is only the prerogative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He has done it over here in the sense of saying, well, camel meat that the Jews had forbidden for themselves was only on account of a nazar that Hazrat Yaqub had made, but this is not really something that is haram for the people who are following the true religion. And whoever invents about Allah untruth after that, then those are the wrongdoers. Surely Allah has spoken the truth, so follow the religion of Ibrahim, the upright one, and he was one of and he was not of the one who ascribed divinity to anything besides Allah. So Allah has spoken the truth, meaning that Allah has revealed to our Prophet ﷺ the questions that were asked by the Jews, and one of these questions was which was the food that Yaqub had left. Next ayat, indeed the first house of worship established for mankind was that at Makkah, blessed and a guidance for the world. In it are clear signs, the standing place of Ibrahim, and whoever enters it attains security. It is a duty people owe to Allah to make a pilgrimage to the house, those who are able to undertake it. And who rejects, then certainly Allah does not stand in need of the worlds. Now here, clear signs of Allah's oneness. I think we see that when we visit Makkah and the continuity of mankind's religious experience, the brotherhood that you feel when you are there in this house of Allah. It is a focal point. It's a focal point for all Muslims. They face towards Kaaba, and it's a very, very strong binding factor for all the Muslims. Kaaba, I think we all know it was rebuilt by Hazrat Ibrahim and Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam, but it is a lot older than the temple, which the first and the second temple, which were earlier, the foundation was laid by Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam, but the first temple was built by Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam in Jerusalem. Now, this ayat also makes one thing very clear, and that is that doing Hajj is a farz for those who are able to undertake this journey, both physically and financially. And those who can but do not, then Allah does not need such people. So if we have performed Hajj, then that's fine. But if we have not performed Hajj and we are physically and financially we have the ability to do that, the best thing we can do in this Ramzan is to make an irada that inshallah we will do our farz Hajj at the first opportunity available. Next ayat, say, O people of the book, why do you disbelieve in the verses of Allah while Allah is a witness over you, or Allah is a witness over what you do? Quran referring to the attempts to prove that our Prophet ﷺ borrowed the ideas that are there in Quran from Bible and then changed them. Quran addresses the people of the book and say, "O people of the book, Ahle Kitab." These were the people who were the educated class in Makkah and Medina at that time. Rest of the people were really ummi, because these were the people who had a revealed religion with them. They had a revealed book like the Torah or the Injil. So they became a great fitna for people to understand the truth, because when they started to, they started to oppose Islam, they started to oppose our Prophet ﷺ. Other people who were the ummi, who had no understanding about the revealed religion, these people became, the Ahle Kitab became a great fitna for them, a great hurdle for them. Say, O people of the book, why do you obstruct believers from Allah's way, seeking to make it crooked while you are a witness, and Allah is not heedless of what you do? Quran is saying over here that making deen crooked is more dangerous than the denial. It's like we talked about a couple of in session ago, half truth and mixing truth with falsehood. This creates doubt in the mind of people. Sometimes we also hear among Muslims about the authenticity of hadith. Few people raise these issues, but a common man really gets confused. He doesn't really understand whether the hadith is what are the categories of hadith, which is sahih, which is hasan, which is mawzu. But making such comments to create doubts about the authenticity of the hadith by some people who are learned in the society, that confuses a lot of people. So we need to be careful how we actually treat these very sensitive subjects. There are people who sometimes try and find flaw in everything, and that's how nature of some people are. And sometimes they only do it just to become a center of attraction, to attract self-importance. Next ayat, O you who believe, if you obey a party of those who were given the book, they would turn you back after your belief to being unbelievers, which means that these people are only interested to see that Muslims convert back. Either they become Christians or they become Jews, and if they don't become Christian or Jews, at least they become munafiqs. So this is how these people of the book are working on Muslims, to turn them back after their belief. And how could you disbelieve while to you are being recited the verses of Allah, and among you is His messenger, and whoever holds firm to Allah has indeed been guided to the straight path. So Quran says over here, whoever holds on firmly to Allah has indeed been guided to the straight path. How? If we, how is this happening? If we want to be guided to the Sirat-e-Mustaqim, the thing that we really need to do is understand, the thing that we need to do is read, the thing that we need to do is implement the Quran in our own life. This Quran is the medicine which will prevent people from moving away from this deen of Islam into the camp of either being a Christian or being a Jew or being a munafiq. So that the medicine that stops us, it's a medicine which cures this disease of hypocrisy is only Quran. Next ayat 102, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and do not die except that you are in a state of Muslim, which means you are in a state of submission. Now this is an ayah I think a lot of us would recall, because this is an ayah which is recited in every khutbah nikah, which perhaps is the most important day, and no one really forgets the day when you got married or you had a nikah. Now what Quran emphasizes over here, it says, fear Allah, that's the first part, but do not die except that you are in a state of submission to Him. So what Quran is emphasizing is that all points, at all times, stay within the state of submission. Since we really do not know that, which is our last breath, so we should never be out of the folds of Islam. Death is something for which, there is no time for us, and there's no way we can actually predict. So what we can do from our side is always to be in a state of submission to Allah. So when people are in a state of sin, they are certainly not in a stage of submission, and hence staying clear of sin, or if sin is done, then immediately asking Allah for forgiveness is one of the most safe thing for people to do. And hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether, and do not become divided, and remember the favors of Allah upon you when you were enemies, and He brought your hearts together, and you became by His favor brothers. And you were on the edge of a pit of fire, and He saved you from it. Thus does Allah make clear to you His verses, that you may be guided. So this ayat says, hold firmly to the rope of Allah. And the rope of Allah, that is the Quran. Imagine somebody who doesn't know swimming, and he's struggling in water, and he's holding on to a strong rope, and that rope is helping him stay afloat. Or even imagine a mountain climber, how he holds this rope, how fast he holds this rope. He doesn't let his grip go weak at any time. And that's the intention over here, that when we hold to the rope of Allah, then it's not occasionally that we are hoping. It's not that we leave this rope and then hold it back later on sometime, because our life depends on this rope. This is our lifeline, and hence we must hold fast to the Quran, because the rope of Allah, as we had seen earlier, this through various sayings of our Prophet ﷺ, this is the Quran. We must hold fast the Quran at all times in our life. This is our lifeline. Today when we see Muslims, I think one of the most disappointing things that you all would note is that Muslims are really divided. Sometimes Muslims don't even pray behind each other. It's so sad to see this division. We are split into so many sects. We are split into so many groups. How can we come together? We can only come together only with Quran. One of the meanings of Quran, qara, yaqru, it also means to read, to follow. But one of the meanings of Quran is to gather together, to come to one point, to learn, to understand, to see what a common message Quran is giving to its people. So it's a great thing, Quran, if people return back to this book, it's a very great thing for people to gather together and become a strong community. And that's the reason of this whole entire program, so that we can actually really understand what is Quran teaching us, what is the message of Quran. And let there be arising from you a nation inviting to all that is good, and enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong, and those are the successful. So let there arise from them a ummat. What's a ummat? Ummat is a group of people who have common objectives. They are not bound by race, they are not bound by color, they are not bound by language, they are not bound by tribes, they are bound by a common objective. So what this ayat is teaching us is that while our primary duty is to enjoin what is good, but nahi anil munkar, which is forbidding people from what is wrong, is equally important. And do not be like those who became divided and fell into dispute after clear proof had come to them. And for them is a dreadful punishment. On the day, some faces will be lit up white and some faces will turn black. As for those whose faces turn black, to them it will be said, did you disbelieve after your belief? Then taste the punishment of what you used to reject. So you can see this situation of on the day of judgment, which some faces will be bright and shining and others will be dark, and why it will be that some people after their belief they turn back into disbelief. So just coming on to Islam and just coming on to this faith is not enough. It is staying over here on this faith till the very end with our last breath. That's equally important. But as for those whose faces will be lit up white, they will be within the mercy of Allah, and they will abide therein eternally. And these are the verses of Allah which we recite to you in truth, and Allah desires no injustice to His creation. To Allah belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and to Allah will all the matters be returned. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله ولو آمن أهل الكتاب لكان خيرا لهم منهم المؤمنون وأكثرهم الفاسقون. And that has been brought forth for mankind. That you have been brought forth for the mankind. You enjoin what is right and you forbid what is wrong, and you believe in Allah. If only the people of the book had believed, it would have been better for them. Among them are the believers, but most of them are defiantly disobedient. So Quran says, you are the best nation. You are the best nation, and you have been brought. You have been brought for a certain purpose. As long as you fulfill these responsibilities, you are the best nation. And these are the responsibilities of Muslim. And what are these responsibilities? That you will enjoin what is right and you will forbid what is wrong, and that you will believe in Allah. And they will not harm you except for some passing hurt. And if they fight you, they will show you their back, and then they will not be aided. Humiliation has been stamped over them wherever they are found, except for a covenant from Allah and bond with men. And they have drawn upon themselves anger from Allah, and stamped over them is humiliation. This is because they disbelieved in the verses of Allah and killed the prophets unjustly. And this is because they were rebellious and transgressed beyond limits. I think if we look at history, and particularly if we study the Jewish history, it's so painful. What this nation has been subjected to, the diaspora in the earlier times, the Inquisitions in Spain, the Holocaust in Germany, the ghettos being created, the concentration camps all over Europe, the destruction of their first temple by Nebuchadnezzar, the destruction of their second temple by Titus. Clearly, no race on the planet Earth has been has sustained these kinds of punishment and survived and thrived. But what a resilient nation they are, what a resilient group of people they are. But whenever they have been in power, they have done zulm. And again, that's how history teaches us. They have done zulm on other people, like they're doing zulm on the Palestinians now. Not all of them are alike. A party of the people of the book stand for the right. They recite the verses of Allah during the hours of the night, prostrating themselves in prayers. Many of these people of the book converted, and there is no doubt that there are many religious people within their fold. And even those who did convert, I mean, we see the example of that, they became such a great assets for Muslim. People like Maryam Jamila, people like Muhammad Asad, to name a few of them, they are such great assets for Islam. They believe in Allah and the last day. They enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, and they hasten in all the good work. And they are among the righteous. Talking about good deeds, this Quran says that they also enjoin what is right and do, and they do they hasten for good deeds. There's a small story, and I think it's such a powerful story talking about good deeds. Once a man came to our Prophet ﷺ, saying that during the days of Jahiliyyah, he used to regularly purchase infant girls who were to be buried alive, and he would care for them for some time and then later free them. And he asked our Prophet ﷺ that this was during the time of Jahiliyyah, this is what good deeds I used to do, what is my reward? And the Prophet ﷺ said, your reward is that Allah has opened your heart to Islam. So if your heart is opening to Islam, this should be considered to be a great reward that Allah is giving all of us. And whatever good they do, they will not be denied its reward. And Allah is knowing of the righteous, those who have taqwa, those who fear Allah, those who are conscious of Allah. Indeed, those who disbelieve, never will their wealth or their children avail them against Allah. And these are the companions of fire, and they shall abide in it eternally. The likeness of what they spend in this world is the likeness of a wind which is extremely cold. It struck the harvest of a people who did wrong against themselves and destroyed it. And Allah is not unjust with them, but they wronged themselves. So the example in this ayah of Quran is of those disbelievers who actually spend only for worldly recognition. They spend plenty of wealth, but with no iman, only for self-projection, only for ostentatiousness, which has really no reward. So a deed becomes a neki, a deed becomes a good deed if it is done to seek Allah's good pleasure in a way that Allah and His Messenger has prescribed. Next ayat, O you who believe, do not take as intimate friends those other than from yourself, for they will not spare any effort, or they would spare no effort to inflict loss upon you. They wish you would have hardship. Hatred has appeared from their mouths, and what their hearts conceal is greater. We have made plain to you the signs if you will understand, or if you would use reason. The word in the beginning of this ayat is used, is a word in Arabic called batan. Batan literally means a stomach. It means that something which is extremely close to us. So batan literally, when you look at in context of this ayat, it means a friendship which is so close, of someone with whom we have friendship. It is such a close friendship that we share all our secrets with him or with her. This is almost like what you call, this is my Razdar. He knows all my secrets. And Quran's message over here is that don't bring close to yourself those people whom Allah has distanced Himself from. So these people, Allah has distanced Himself from him. So be very careful. We don't know what is in their hearts. Allah knows what is in their heart, and Allah is telling us what is in their heart, that hatred has already appeared from their mouth, and what their hearts conceal is much greater. Be kind to them. Be gentle to them. Be helpful for them. But do not make the extremely close relationship where you disclose all your secrets to them. Here you are loving them, but they do not love you. While you believe in the book, all of it, and when they meet you, they say, we believe. But when they are alone, they bite their fingertips at you at rage. Say, die in your rage. Indeed, Allah is knowing of what is within your hearts. If good touches you, it distresses them. But if harm strikes you, they rejoice at it. And if you are patient and fear Allah, their plot will not harm you at all. Indeed, Allah is all encompassing of what they do. So the next ayat is an ayat which refers to the battle of Uhud. And we will look at many of these ayahs now, which are actually all focusing around Uhud, the defeat of Uhud that took place, and what messages we need to draw from that. وَإِذْ غَدَوْتَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ تُبَوِّئُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ مَقَاعِدَ لِلْقِتَالِ وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And remember when you set out early in the morning from your home to post the believers at their station for the battle, and Allah is all hearing and all knowing. So this ayat is referring to the battle of Uhud, which was fought on 3rd of Shawwal, 3rd year of Hijrat. It was a Saturday morning. Kuffar came back after their defeat in Badr with 10,000 army of 10,000 people, and they were burning with revenge. They were burning with their national pride, for their personal glory. Muslims were still weak. Muslims had about 1,000 battle-hardened Sahabas, companion, and out of this 1,300 walked away. Just at the time of the battle, just before the battle, the 300 people left the battleground, and they were left by the chief hypocrite, who was Abdullah bin Ubay, and they said, we don't think that there's going to be any battle. So 700 Muslims were left to face an army of 10,000. When the two parties among you were about to lose courage, but Allah was their guardian of both of them, and upon Allah the believers put their trust. Now, out of these 700 who were left behind, there were some good Muslims, but some fear crept in. Like they say, to err is human. And the lesson that Quran teaches over here is that they were not hypocrites. And the lesson is forgive their mistakes. Don't go around blacklisting people because they sometimes lose courage or sometimes fear creeps into them. Allah does correction, but He does not take us to account whenever people transgress or whenever we show weakness. And that's the attitude we also need to have amongst ourselves. Sometimes we see people who are not very strong, who have weaknesses, and we need to accept them and work with them so that they can come up the curve and improve. And already Allah has given you victory in the battle of Badr while you were weak. Then fear Allah, perhaps you will be grateful. So Battle of Badr being referred over here, which was fought a year earlier, second year of Hijrat, 17th of Ramazan, when Muslims were materially weak. And as a materially weak army, they overcame the enemy with Allah's help and achieved a surprising victory. Remember when you said to the believers, is it not sufficient for you that your Lord should reinforce you with 3,000 angels sent down? Yes, if you remain patient and conscious of Allah and the enemy comes upon you attacking in rage, your Lord will reinforce you with 5,000 angels having marks of distinction. Now, this you can see over here that Allah sent 3,000 and 5,000 angels with marked distinction. They came in, but the thing that is being described over here, if you remain patient and if you remain conscious of Allah. Please remember, wars are fought and won with human effort. All wars are fought and won with human effort. And firm faith in Allah's help. For a war, it is necessary to be steadfast. For a war, it is necessary to be fearless. And for a war, it is necessary that we have the courage. If Allah had so desires to send angels and just win wars, no kuffar would be alive over here. It is human effort that Allah is looking at. Next ayat, and Allah did not make it but a message of good news for you, so that your hearts may be at rest. This news was there so that your hearts may be at rest. And victory is only from Allah, the Almighty, the Wise. We need to use all human resources. We need to use all the means at our disposal. There are no shortcuts to success. That He might cut off a portion of the disbelievers or abase them so that they turn back disappointed. See, Badr Muslims had won, Uhud Muslims lost, and after the loss of Uhud, everyone, even the kuffar who came, the 10,000 army that came from Makkah, they saw the shameless cruelty of the kuffar, and that became exposed. The real nature of kufr and the kuffars of Makkah became exposed. And a number of prominent people would later convert, including Hazrat Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu, who was a commander in this battle. Even people like Wahshi bin Harb, who had martyred Hazrat Hamza radiallahu anhu, they would later convert, looking at the character of Muslims and looking at the kirdar of the kuffar. Subsequently, even Abu Sufyan, who was the leader of Makkah, he would also convert. It is no concern of whether He relents towards them or punishes them, for they are unjust. Now you can see from this ayat that Rabb is a Rabb and a slave is a slave. No matter how a slave comes close to Allah, he will still remain a slave. And this is in context to a prayer of our Prophet ﷺ. Our Prophet ﷺ prayed when he was lying on the ground severely injured, and his prayer was, how can these people prosper after having done this to their Prophet who invites them to their sustainer? Allah the Master, He immediately responds and He says, punishment and forgiveness is my prerogative. It is in my hand. I decide who I punish and who I forgive. So a Rabb will always remain a Rabb, and a slave will always remain a slave, no matter how high the position of the slave may be. And to Allah belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and He forgives whom He wills and He punishes whom He wills, and Allah is always forgiving and merciful. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la ta'kulu riba adhafan muzafa wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. O you who believe, do not consume usury, do not consume riba, doubling and multiplying, but fear Allah that you may be prosperous. So interest and usury That's the ohad of modern Muslims, right? That's the ohad. This is the reason why we are losing our battles. This is the real reason that taqwa cannot, fear of Allah, being conscious of Allah, cannot come in a body that is fed with haram. Muslims, will never prosper until they free themselves from the scourge of riba. The other thing that this ayat talks about is that patience and taqwa can only be done if we stay away from things which are forbidden. And riba is something that Allah has forbidden, in fact calling it the haram. This is the mother of all the haram. So it's hard to imagine that Muslims continue to indulge in riba and then still expect that they will have mercy from Allah. And fear the fire which has been prepared for the disbelievers, and obey Allah and His Messenger so that you may obtain mercy. Next ayat, and hasten to forgiveness from your Rabb, and the gardens as white as the heavens and the earth, prepared for the righteous. Those who spend in the cause of Allah during ease and hardship, and who restrain anger, and who pardon people, and Allah loves the doers of good. These are the attributes of people with taqwa. These are the attributes of people who fear Allah. They are constantly in the mode of doing good deeds at all time. Even in war, they restrain, they control their anger. We need to ingrain all these things in our lives so that when we are in a state of war, at that time also we do not forget the qualities which make us human beings, which is our akhlaq, which is our character, which is our behavior. And the first of that Quran mentions over here first is your ability to be able to control anger. And that's the benchmark. That's the first benchmark. Anger, when we all feel angry at some point in time, but when anger comes, it comes for a very fleeting moment. If you control it at that point, at that time, and you do not speak, you turn your attention away, it will be something which will prevent you from regretting, what you say later on. Sometimes people in a state of anger use words which they continue to regret for the rest of their life. There is a saying, or there is a hadith which says, Jo chup raha usne najat pai. One who remains silent, he is saved. So practice being silent, especially when you are in a state of anger. And then the other thing Quran teaches us over here is, and then pardon and forgive. Pardon and forgive. There's a hadith of our Prophet ﷺ where our Prophet said, forgive the unjust, give to the one who has never given, and meet those who don't meet you. Forgive the unjust. So this is something, forgiveness and pardon is something that we must try and inculcate within ourselves. Islam is all about relationship building, right? We see it all talks about all these good qualities, and these good qualities help us to build good relationships. And those who, when they commit any immorality or do injustice to their soul by transgression, remember Allah and seek forgiveness for their sin. And who can forgive sins except Allah? And who do not persist in what they have done while they know. So when they know something that they have committed a sin, they immediately turn to Allah and ask for forgiveness. So turn to Allah if you have committed a sin. You will commit sins. That's how human beings are. Human beings are weak, and so therefore they do commit sins. But as you commit sin and have a recognition, turn to Allah and seek for His forgiveness. Muslims, this is the confession of a Muslim. A Muslim does confession of his past sins in front of Allah and seeks His forgiveness. Every time we come in front of Allah, we need to seek forgiveness for the sins that we may have done intentionally and unintentionally, sins that we remember and sins that we do not even remember. For them, their reward is forgiveness from their Lord, and gardens beneath which rivers flow in paradise, wherein they will abide eternally, and excellent is the reward of those who work. So this is the reward of those people who strive, who don't just say these things, who work for it, who strive for it. Jannat is reached not just by desiring. We all desire Jannat. All of us have good intentions to reach Jannat, but Jannat is only reached by striving and by working. Similar situation as yours has passed on before you. So travel throughout the earth and observe how was the end of those who denied. See the Samud. See the ruins of Samud, see the ruins of Ad, the Firaun, the Lut. Learn from history of how Allah has destroyed the unjust civilizations. Next ayat. This Quran is a clear warning to all people and a guidance and admonition for those who are conscious of Allah. So do not weaken and do not grieve. You will be superior if you are true believers. Defeat, it's a normal thing, when we fail anywhere, defeat gives rise to dejection. We feel sad, our energy goes down, it saps away our strength. But true faith is that we will throw this back. This is from Allah, it is min Allah, this is from Allah. And true faith is that we will rise up again very quickly. If you have received a wound, similar wound afflicted other people, and we bring such days to people by turns so that Allah may know those who believe and take witness from among you. So Kafir lost the battle of Badr, Kuffar had lost the battle of Badr, but they came back. They came back despite the fact that they were faithless people. They came back. Why should Muslims feel dejected and lost? So the moral that this ayat is teaching Muslims over here should not be that we depend upon victory and success, but it should be about the effort that we had put in. What effort did we put in over here? Please remember, neither a day is permanent nor is night permanent. Things change. Be patient. Be resilient. Neither happiness nor grief is permanent. These are events that are there, and they are there just to test our iman. Imagine if all the things remain good all the time. Imagine if we had won every battle. Imagine that we had overcome every grief without any effort. Where would the test be? Where would the test be? The test is we will lose. The test is we will have our Uhud. But also the test is that we will have our Badr, we will have our victories, we will have our success. As night is not permanent, so is day not permanent. So this is all about our effort. We need to continue with our effort, whatever the situation may be. And that Allah may purify the believers through trials and destroy the disbeliever. Or do you think that you will enter into paradise while Allah has not yet made evident those of you who fight in His cause and made evident those who are steadfast? And you had certainly wished for martyrdom while you encountered it. And now that you see it before you while you were looking on. So Quran's advice to people is develop strength of faith in Allah. And not a kind of a fleeting desire for self-sacrifice. All of us, when we sit in the comfort of our home, we all want to be martyred. We all want to do, sacrifice. But Quran says, develop a strong faith. Don't worry about, death. Worry about your own effort. Don't worry about martyrdom. Worry about your own effort. That's where you will be. That's where you will be questioned. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قد خلت من قبله الرسل أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين. And Muhammad is no more but a messenger. Other messengers have passed on before him. So if he was to die or be killed, would you turn back on your heels to unbelief? But he who turns back on his heel will never harm Allah at all, but Allah will reward the ungrateful. The word Muhammad that comes in this ayat, Muhammad means one who is praised. There are other words, for Prophet ﷺ, the word Ahmad also is the name of our Prophet ﷺ. Ahmad is the one who praises. Now in Quran, there are 4 different places in Quran where this name comes, which is one over here, and we'll also see one of the surahs, which is a whole surah named Surah Muhammad. Now this ayat actually stresses on the mortality of our Prophet ﷺ as a human being, so that later people do not exceed limits and give him a divinity like the Christians gave divinity to Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. Please remember that Islam survived because it was never based on personality worship. The death of our Prophet ﷺ was a great calamity. No doubt it was a great calamity because he was the last messenger, and this is the first time in the history of mankind that no further messenger would be sent. This is also a time where the revelations came to an end. The book of guidance came to an end. So it was a mammoth occasion. It was a real tragedy for Muslims. But Islam has strong foundation. Hence Islam continued to strive in its original form without any distortion. Now, this ayah was also revealed at a time when there was a rumor in the Battle of Uhud about the death, of our Prophet ﷺ, that he has been martyred, and this caused many Muslims to abandon fight. They just threw their swords down. They said, if he is no longer alive, what is our purpose that we should live? Now, this passage of Quran was also recited by Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu when our Prophet ﷺ died. And Muslims collected all around, and they were in a state of deep shock. They really didn't know that this can even happen, and they just couldn't really understand the gravity of the whole thing. So Hazrat Abu Bakr, he addressed this crowd, and he read these very ayahs. He read these ayahs in front of people, and then he added on a word, and he said, "Behold, whoever worships Allah, know that Allah is ever living and will never die." And it said people just calmed down after that. They really realized, yes, we have lost the messenger, but life has to go on, Islam has to go on, Allah is ever living, He never dies. And it's our responsibility to Allah to continue to strive for this deen. And it is not possible for one of you to die except by the permission of Allah at a degree determined by writing. And whoever desires the reward of this world, we will give it to him. And whoever desires the reward of the hereafter, we will give it to him. And soon we will reward the grateful. People have different aims and different motives for working. Those who do it for Allah and the hereafter, they will get a reward in this world as well as a reward in the hereafter. Sometimes people are afraid to work for hereafter because they fear that they will lose the world. The world will be missed out. Again, this is just a delusion or an illusion of shaitan. How many a prophets fought, and with him fought many worshippers of Allah, but they never lost heart due to what afflicted them in the cause of Allah, nor did they weaken or submit. And Allah loves the steadfast. So this is the quality that Allah loves. Even if you have lost, even if you have fallen down, get up again. Be steadfast. You are doing it for a cause. You are doing it for the sake of Allah. And their words were not but that they said, "Our Lord, forgive our sins and the excess committed in our affairs, and plant firmly our feet and give us victory over the disbelieving people." Everyone wants to be with a group of people who have success in this world. There's a saying in English, nothing succeeds like success. So people thought that truth and worldly success go hand in hand. This is a misconception. Difficulties come in in everyone's life. So Allah gave them the reward of this world and the good reward of the hereafter, and Allah loves the doer of good. O you who believe, if you obey those who disbelieve, they will turn you back on your heels, and you will then become the losers. So defeat of Uhud was really a test for Muslims. It was not just a test, but it was a training. It was a training for Muslims for a much greater objective, because Allah wanted to separate the good from the bad. And immediately, even before the beginning of the battle, you could see who is a hypocrite and who is a true Muslim. If these difficulties, if there are difficulties in following Deen, it shouldn't really lead to weaken the Iman. It shouldn't. We must be mindful of the strong faith during all these difficult circumstances. Our Iman should not weaken, our faith should not weaken. But Allah is your protector, and He is the best of the helper. We will soon cast terror in the hearts of those who disbelieve for what they ascribe partners with Allah, for which He had not sent down any authority, and their refuge will be the fire, and wretched is the home of those who are the wrongdoers. So in the battle of Uhud, the kuffar could have easily destroyed Muslims. At one point in time, towards the end of the battle, if they wanted, they could have regrouped and destroyed Muslims. But due to some fear, they didn't. And this is because, as Allah says in this ayat, Allah will soon cast terror into their hearts. And there was some terror, there was some fear that they didn't turn back and they come and destroy entire Medina and in the entire Muslim army. And one of the reasons for this is because shirk makes Iman weak. So have strong ties with Allah. We must have strong ties with Allah. And we must burn our boats. The real commitment does not come without our having a very firm faith in Allah. And Allah has certainly fulfilled his promise to you when you were killing the enemy by his permission, until the time when you lost courage and fell into dispute about the order given by the Prophet, and disobeyed after he had shown you that which you love. Among you are some who desire this world, and among you are some who desire the hereafter. Then he turned back from them defeated, then he might test you. And he has already forgiven you, and Allah is full of kindness for the believers. So this ayat actually tells us 4 reasons for this defeat in Uhud. And these are the reasons for defeat of any mission. Any mission will be defeated if these 4 things are present. First and the foremost, lack of courage. That's what this ayat says. Number 2, mutual dispute among Muslims. Number 2. Number 3, disobedience of a leader, and in this case, disobedience of a commandment of our Prophet ﷺ. And number 4, excessive love of the world, where people, went after the Mal-e Ghanimat. We desire that the results of our efforts are shown in this world, but Allah desires us to focus on the hereafter. Everyone wants to be associated with success. This is human nature, this is human psychology. Now, this defeat in Uhud was not a punishment, but a training for future battles by pointing out the weaknesses that were present in Muslims, and they overcame these weaknesses: the lack of courage, the mutual dispute, the disobedience of our Prophet ﷺ, the love of the worldly goods that had crept into their hearts. And later on, they reached to these high limits. They conquered nearly 2/3 of the civilized world. If we are obedient to Allah and His Messenger, the defeat is acceptable, fine. As long as we are obedient to Allah and His Messenger, if we are defeated, that's fine. But what is not acceptable is that we become successful by being disobedient to Allah and by being disobedient to His Messenger. Remember when you fled and climbed the mountain without paying heed to anyone, while the Messenger was calling from you from behind. So Allah repaid you with distress upon distress, so that you would not grieve for that which had escaped you, which means of the victory and the spoils of war, or for that which had befallen you, which means the injury and the death that had befallen. And Allah is fully acquainted of what you do. So distress fell upon Muslims, no doubt about that. 70 Muslims were martyred in this battle. Our Prophet ﷺ was injured. The disobedience of our Prophet ﷺ played heavy on the minds and hearts of Muslims. And then finally the news that our Prophet ﷺ has been martyred, a false news, but at that time it caused real distress in the hearts of Muslims. Remember, only 40 people out of the 700 disobeyed. 40 disobeyed. The 700 rest were not punished, but they were tested by Allah. So if you are sincere in your effort, whether you are winning or whether you are losing, there is no consequence. There is no consequence of that. You are already successful. It's your effort that makes you successful, not the end result of winning or losing. Then after distress and grief, He sent down upon you protection in form of drowsiness, overcoming a faction of you while the other faction worried about themselves, thinking of Allah other than the truth, and thought of ignorance, saying, is there anything for us to have done in this matter? Say, indeed, the matter belongs completely to Allah. They conceal within themselves what they will not reveal to you. They say, is there anything we could have done in this matter? Some of us would not have been killed right here. Say, even if you had been inside your houses, those decreed to be killed would have come out of their place of death, so that Allah might test what is in your hearts and purify what is in your heart. And Allah is knowing of what is hidden in your chest. So the distress that came on Muslims, there was a relaxing experience to it. They felt calm at some point in time. There was no panic. They knew at the end of the day, even if they lose, even if they are martyred, they will return back to Allah and with victory. In time of distress and anxiety, we need to be calm. That's the matter. We need to be calm so that we can take correct decisions. What did we earn from the situation? Difficulties will come. But we really need to be calm and in times of distress, and let not anxiety seep inside us. Indeed, those of you who turned back on the day the two armies met, it was the shaitan who caused them to slip because of some blame they had earned. But Allah has already forgiven them. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and forbearing. So shaitan's influence on people is not the primary cause of sin, but it is the first consequence. It's the person's own attitude of mind which chooses the easier option, which actually makes them slip away and commit a sin. O you who believe, do not be like those who disbelieve and said about their brothers when they traveled through the land or went out to fight, if they had been with us, they would not have died or have been killed. So Allah makes that misconception a regret within their hearts. And it is Allah who gives life and causes death, and Allah is seeing what you do. Death is a natural process. The end will come. It comes to everyone. It will come when it will come. But if we have gained the hereafter, it's not a deal that we should miss. We cannot delay, we cannot advance our death. So should we say, if we had done this, and maybe if we had done that, he wouldn't have died? We shouldn't. We shouldn't use these words. Someone who had to die would anyway die. It doesn't mean that Muslims become suicidal, but we must take all possible precautions. However, if death does come, accept it, rather than saying, I wish we had done this, I wish we had done that, to prevent it. Because this wishing is only a kalma of the shaitan. And if you are killed in the cause of Allah or die, then forgiveness from Allah and mercy is better than whatever you have accumulated in this world. And whether you die or are killed, to Allah you will be gathered. So by mercy of Allah, you are lenient, you are gentle with them. And if you had been stern and hard at heart, they would have broken away from you. So pardon them and forgive them and consult them in the matter. And when you have decided, put your trust on Allah. Indeed, Allah loves those who put their trust on Him. So this ayat is so, different. It's so beautiful. It is actually teaching us the temperament of a good leader, what a leader should be doing. Our misconception is that our leader must be harsh, must be rude, must be ruthless with people. If people are not otherwise people will not work properly. We have to be very strict with our employees, otherwise they will not work properly. The most important thing Quran is teaching us over here is, for a leader, it is important that he wins loyalties. It's important that he wins love of people. It is most important that he wins respect. Be gentle. Be gentle with people, but do not confuse gentleness with compromise. Certainly Islam is not telling us to compromise. The next quality of leader that Quran describes over here is that when you have decided, put your trust on Allah. So the next quality is, a leader will consult. He will talk to his people. He will take their opinion. He will take their opinion, and then once he decides, after that, he puts the trust on Allah, and then he is firm on his decision. And if Allah aids you, no one can overcome you. But if He forsakes you, who is there that can aid you after Him? And upon Allah, let the believers put their trust. It is not for any prophet that he should act, unfaithfully in regards to the war, the mali ghanimat, the war booty. And whoever betrays, taking unlawfully, will bring his deceit upon him on the day of resurrection. Then every soul shall be fully compensated for what it has earned, and they shall not be wrong. It is he who pursues the pleasure of Allah, like the one who brings upon himself the anger of Allah, and whose refuge is hell, and what a wretched destination. And they are varying grades in sight of Allah, and Allah is all-seeing of whatever you do. The last ayat this evening, which is ayat number 164, لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. And certainly did Allah confer a great favor upon believers when He sent among them a messenger from themselves, reciting to them His verses and purifying them and teaching them the book and wisdom, although they had been in manifest error. So after giving us all the blessings, our health, our children, our wealth and wisdom, Allah didn't say that He has done any ihsan on us, that He has blessed us. All the things that He has given to us, He didn't say, I've done ihsan on you. He did a favor on us when He gave us guidance, and He mentions that. that this is a favor on us, that He has given us guidance and He has sent a messenger. And this is a ihsan that He reminds us in this ayat. There are 4 ayahs, which this ayat will get repeated 4 times. 4 times Allah reminds us that the greatest ihsan that we have is guidance. We must treasure it. We must protect it, and we must make sure that this guidance is always the thing that is closest to our heart. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quranil Azim wa nafana wal iyyakum bi ayati wa zikril hakim.